In this episode of IT SPARC Cast, Microsoft predicts the end of the web browser, AI news reports could cost you your job, and is English the new Python? Welcome to IT SPARC Cast. I'm your host, John Barger.
And I'm your host, Lou Schmidt.
It's Friday, December 13th. Have you crossed paths with a black cat under a ladder today?
Are you feeling lucky, punk? Well, let's go break some mirrors and find out.
IT SPARC Cast is a digest of the IT news over the last week with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts, each with over 20 years of experience working in IT or for IT vendors. And now, the news bites.
Let's start with what I found a really interesting piece from Analytics India. And their thesis is 2024 is the year English changed the coding game forever. Now, English is what really caught my attention there. Not necessarily that it isn't Python, but that it seems like the dominant language in this area is English. So they start off with sort of a quote from Andrej Karpathy, the senior director of AI at Tesla, predicted this trend last year. He said the hottest new programming language is English. The shift kind of represents a democratization of programming. So essentially, you don't have to know Python, C++, Java, whatever. We're rapidly reaching the point where you don't have to know those. Now, John and I have various opinions on this. We're seeing some really cool stuff coming, like GitHub Copilot, which is a Microsoft thing. I've applied for that. Cursor AI are certainly big things. We think AI's biggest impact is probably in the programming space, telling things what to do. I think English is going to become the dominant method we tell computers what to do. Does that mean that anybody can do this? Well, that is the debate, John. I mean, what's your point on this?
Yeah, so I mean, we've obviously seen over the last 2 years the rapid infusion of AI into our day-to-day lives through ChatGPT and Copilot and Gemini and all these other tools that we're using on a regular basis. But in no space has it moved faster than it has when it comes to coding. And the ability for a computer to generate code has become so good that it's got a lot of programmers and QA personnel questioning whether AI is going to take their job. And I think at the end of the day, we have said a number of times that that's not the case. But instead of seeing AI as a robot that does your job, I like to see it as a power suit that makes you better at your job.
So I have a question. You have a degree in computer science?
It's computer operation systems. Yeah.
Computer operations. Okay. So when you did that, so I have a degree, for folks in the peanut section here, I have a degree in electrical engineering, and I've done hardware level implementations of assembly code, for example, to control things. One of the things that I think that this article is missing, and they do sort of call it out, is computer science, computer operations, like you have, John, that gave you valuable information on how a bigger system comes together. Have you seen that in the AI space?
So yeah, that's the interesting part, is that we're not going to move away from the case where humans are the core designers. I think what we're going to see is, I need a subroutine that's pretty generic and boring, and I don't want to write it. So write this subroutine that comes up with a random number that is prime. Or I need a subroutine that filters out all the non-alphabetic characters from this string. Those are like things that I just don't want to write. And, an AI can do it for me and it's fine. But creation of something new, that's something I think we're still going to need humans for. But that being said, I think what this article is leading towards is that at all levels, you're going to find your ability to generate tasks and code and apps is going to be enhanced. Whether you're a 12-year-old that wants to write a social app for your school and just for your school, then you can do that without knowing any code through the tools that we've talked about. You can But maybe you're an advanced programmer and you need some of those subroutines written. This will help you in that way as well. And that's where I see this, where English becomes the new programming language. And at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be English. It could be German. It could be whatever your native language is. But it's the spoken word that takes over for some of our coding tasks. I just watched the demo from OpenAI as part of their 12 days of OpenAI, where they release something new every weekday for 12 days. And they released Canvas. And Canvas is a collaborative tool that lets you collaborate on documents or on code. Now, normally when you say collaborate, you mean, something like Lou and I would collaborate on our show notes for this. But what this really means is a collaborative tool between ChatGPT and you. You can feed it a report that you've written, or a book report for school or whatever, and have it give you feedback on it to help you make it better. Or you can ask it to write code, then you can edit the code, make changes to the code, add to the code, and it has a built-in Python interpreter. So the Python part will actually run in real time within ChatGPT. It's pretty impressive. And that's just the next step. We're going to continue to see that grow and grow to the point that, again, a middle schooler can say, I want a social media app that lists all of the activities available for school and gives you the ability to sign up for the chess club or the Dungeons and Dragons club or the soccer training camp or whatever it might be, and allow you to do that specific to your school without ever knowing any code at all.
I'm not even sure you realize how much bigger this could be. So let's take a look at this thing. In this device I have in my hand, the supercomputer I have in my hand, when I think about the potential programs, you always think about the applications that are running on it, but you may miss the point that this thing is loaded with digital signal processors. Those are what are processing the audio. They're processing RF. If you're an engineer, you spend a lot of your time trying to figure out, okay, what linear algebra function do I need to stuff into this DSP to get the right frequency or the right transformation or whatever. And there's a big industry around this. MATLAB is the go-to tool for this. They have something called Simulink that plugs directly into an actual live DSP, and you can do real-time editing. It's incredibly powerful, but there's a learning curve. Imagine applying the ability to talk with an AI system, an LLM, and say, okay, I need to filter out this part of the signal. I like this part. I don't. Okay, barfs it out. Or even imagine, if I don't know, John, if you've ever seen this, but analog circuit design, right? I've got an incoming signal and I want an output, and that thing in between is a transfer function, right? Instead of me going and saying, okay, I got to design and Kirchhoff's law and all this stuff, impedance, signal strength, this is the output I want. Blah! Spice barfs it up in between using AI. That's an analog design program. We should talk about this some more, because the interface into how we're going to do this is sort of a question mark. There's a question mark. And I think you had something you wanted to talk about there.
Yeah, so The Verge had an interview with Mustafa Suleyman, who is the head of AI at Microsoft. And Suleyman predicts that AI is going to replace the web browser and search engines. And actually, what he technically said is that AI is the next web browser and search engine. And, we don't think that he's salty at all about the fall of IE and Chrome taking its place. But is it the next search engine? Yeah, I think it is. Is it the next browser? I think that that's open to debate. So my take on this, Lou, is that Suleyman is not predicting the death of the web browser. That's how the article is kind of written, in maybe a clickbaity kind of way. I think what he's saying is that today, the web browser is the default app on your computer. Let's think more about desktops and laptops versus mobile devices, even though mobile devices still, it's a pretty prominent application. And that you default to your web browser, and then you access your search engine, and you access all these articles and websites through your web browser. I don't think that's going away, but I think that it might take a back seat to a natural language AI where you say, give me all the top tourist destination spots in Greece. And then it will list those for you. So I don't have to go comb through a website. But if I say, okay, Cyprus sounds interesting. Give me more details on Cyprus. Then it might open up a web page with pictures and maps and links to restaurants and times for beaches and things like that, where it comes across better in an HTML view. I think that's what he's predicting here.
Maybe. I mean, the thing is that if you look at the current state of AI, we don't really have AGI. We keep talking about AGI, and I would certainly encourage you to go over to The Verge and take a look at this interview. I think it was pretty well done. Talks a lot about hardware wise, where are we as far as being able to really start getting something that can think, and I think that's really interesting. But the challenge I have with this is that if you really look at what AI is right now, at least how I look at it, and I'd love for you guys to come and tell me, okay, I'm looking at it wrong. I'm not so sure about this, but think about it this way. AI is sort of like an encapsulation of a search engine algorithm that's been pre-linked. So you get a whole bunch of information to train this thing. And then it sort of develops a personality based on that information. I would argue modern search engines already have that. And Google's a granddaddy of it all. PageRank went out and stomped the living snot out of everybody. So in a way, if you were this gentleman, Mustafa, who's obviously been at Google too, smart guy, and said this is the next web browser, I think he's more saying this is the next phenomena like a web browser, because a web browser with this added to it becomes incredibly powerful. I don't want my system to talk to me unless I'm in a hurry. I take information far more quickly by reading than by
Yeah,
seeing.
so I think the interesting part is people do learn differently and people do consume differently, but never underestimate the human ability to innovate and make things easier, and the human's desire to be lazy, and the human's ability to innovate in order to be lazy. I remember, I don't know, 15 years ago when I found out that almost all my nieces and nephews and a number of other people, their primary search engine was YouTube. And now that doesn't sound weird, but at the time I'm like, you're searching, for whatever it is that you want to know about on YouTube. And now it's TikTok, right? And that's where people get their information from because it's delivered to them in a format that those individuals prefer.
You're going to get
Short.
your information off of TikTok?
Dude, it is like the number one information source on the planet right now.
Now I
But
can
imagine
understand. I
now,
understand why they're trying to hurt it.
so,
I get it now. Okay.
but now take that the next step further where I just want to have a conversation. Now, since Lou and I were children, the future in sci-fi has been the talking computer. And we're there. We got there hundreds of years before the prediction. It was the thing on Star Trek. You could talk to the computer and say, give me all the information on this. And it would have a screen. It would display pictures of, so you knew who they were talking about and so forth. And I think that we're basically there. You can have that conversation with multiple LLMs today, ChatGPT being the most prominent, but others allowing you to have conversations and pull up information from the web and deliver it to you. And I think that that's exactly what you were saying, Lou, is that is going to become the primary interface, with a browser then displaying the supporting data versus you going into a browser, trying to figure out the best search term to plug into your search engine of choice and getting the results, and then combing through all the articles to find the one that's relevant to you.
Well,
That's where
that's
we're heading.
true, but that's in AI, we call that prompt engineering, right?
But I think that, honestly, I think that prompt engineering, this is my take on it, was a flash in the pan. I think that prompt engineering was something that you needed as AI started to get better. And I think that the need for true prompt engineering will no longer be a main component of using an LLM in the next 6 to 12 months. I think that,
Possibly.
yeah.
Let
So
me
I
well, let
think,
me tell you about something I tried.
sure.
Last night, I wanted to find out what the fan on my new shiny MacBook Pro M4 sounded like, so I downloaded Llama 3.3 dash 70B, 70 billion,
Yep.
right, on LM Studio, and I asked it a question. I have a couple of standard questions I ask to sort of start determining what the bias of the model is,
Mhm.
and when I asked it, it went down and listed a bunch of stuff and then said, "I'm not entirely sure about this thing. Can we converse about it more?" And I think
Nice.
that's what you're talking about right there. And I didn't see the mini llama model did not do this. The bigger one does. And this is a fairly beefy machine. It's 64 gig and it's got the biggest processor you can get in the current MacBook Pro. But I thought it was fascinating that it actually started asking me more questions. And so they're starting to build the prompt engineering directly into the prompt. Did I answer you right? What is it? ChatGPT is doing the same thing, but I've noticed it's absolutely increasing. So, to sort of put a exclamation mark or a period on this discussion, my take is web browser isn't going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Web browser is going to be here. This adjunctive chunk of AI, whatever we're calling it, is going to plug into it because there's a difference between the thinking and searching piece and the difference between the presentation layer. I think we mostly nailed the presentation layer. Web browsers are good. They do this job well. But imagine this scenario, John. Oh, I want to buy a trailer and I'm interested. I have this model of car and this is sort of what I'm looking for. Can you tell me which one would be more efficient and show me an analysis of that? It comes back and says, "Do you have $5 for that question?" $5. Goes to a supercomputer, runs the simulation. That
Well,
would be cool.
that brings up another discussion, which I think should be for another time, which is how are these tools that sit in front of, or in some cases replace search engines, how do they monetize? So I think that what we
Yes.
need to do is have a IT SPARC Cast deep dive on the future of AI use, its use as a search engine, its use as a front end to the browser, and as a coding tool. I think that's probably more than one deep dive. So we'll get into that. And I think one of those key things is about the monetization, because if are we going to be seeing ads inside of our LLM interface? Are we going to be seeing a subscription service that then gets rid of the ads? And then does that cause problems for lower income areas and things like that? So I think that's a real interesting discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. We need to have it.
Yeah, why don't we move on to our next article, which is the only one today that's not AI focused? Go ahead, Lou.
This is sort of a quick hit, sort of a heads up for folks out there. You're running a server farm Linux box. So Ars Technica had an article about a week or two ago talking about Virus Total, world's first UEFI bootkit for Linux. So just so you understand, the UEFI stands for Unified Extensible Firmware Interface. It's designed to replace BIOS. Eventually, it's going to replace BIOS. BIOS is basic input output system. The whole idea of these systems is they set up the computer from its initial state to start loading your operating system. If you happen to get a virus into that system, into the BIOS or into the UEFI, you've got a big problem. In a way, you're screwed because you have a firmware repository on your motherboard, on your main system, that is the Bible of how to bring up the system. And if you put in an exploit in that place, it's very, very difficult to get rid of. At which point you've got to like flash every firmware interface on the board, cross-check everything. This is why we talk about the trusted boot and stuff like this. the TPM chips having that and being able to go back to that for cross-checking. So keep an eye out for this, because this has been a problem in the Windows world for a while. We want to make it easy for you to upgrade your firmware. Gamers, especially, you folks push the boundary when it comes to what the firmware can do. So companies have made it simple to upgrade the firmware, but at the same time you do that, you make it easier for somebody to put something malicious in there. Less of a problem on Linux, but we're starting to see this stuff show up. So definitely if you're in the Linux community, you're in a data center, you're somebody who just uses it like I do on Pi and another device. I've got a bunch of devices running Linux. Keep your eye on this one. It's out there. Just because they've now found one, and this was found on a Ware's site, they found out this one wasn't unkillable. They could get rid of it, but it's there, and it's going to evolve. Now, one of the other things that we like to look into, we're doing a lot of stuff on remote work, and we went to look into some stuff on a buyer's guide, and we found out something interesting. John, why don't you bring us up on that?
Yeah, so now it's time for my hot take.
It's hot too.
So as Lou mentioned before the break, we do a lot of research for our news episodes on Fridays, and we compile some articles, we go through, we write some notes, and so forth. And I found 2 articles that I thought was really interesting because of the work that we're doing on this IT SPARC Cast deep dive with regards to remote work. And I put those articles in, and as I was reading through them, I was really struggling, and Lou was reading through as well. We really started struggling with some of the recommendations that were being made. And Lou kind of had a light bulb moment, and after he mentioned it, I read through it and saw the same thing, is that we believe that both of these articles were written by a large language model. And there are 2 different sources. One's Computer World. It was basically a buyer's guide of what decisions you have to make in order to choose the best video conferencing solution for you. And the other one was from Forbes on choosing the right enterprise AI model that you can use in taking into account data security and so forth. And as we were going through this, we found that, now again, I can't guarantee it, but they really do look like they were written by LLMs. So both articles were a bit soulless and meandering, very much like if you've ever asked a chatbot to write up something for you. It kind of weaves in and out of a few different areas and sometimes repeats itself. It has trouble following those breadcrumbs to get a really concise article. And then there were some oddities, like the Computer World article, and we'll put links into the show notes if you want to check these out, mentioned as far as video conferencing solutions that should be considered: Avaya Spaces, Alcatel-Lucent's Enterprise Rainbow, and Vonage, along with your classic examples like WebEx, Zoom, and GoToMeeting. And I'm like, why? Why would you even recommend it? They had 13 recommendations in total. And I'm like, what are you doing? And I think an AI just said, well, what are all the video conferencing solutions that are out there? And it brought them up. And that was like the first, red flag for us. Now, the Forbes article was very similar in that it was high level, had no meat, and really just made general thoughts about data security and such with AI. So here's my take on this. I believe both these articles were written by a large language model. And we've seen this type of use of AI when it comes to mainstream clickbait kind of articles, the top 10 action movies of the 80s or whatever, where it's really designed to be clickbaity and get you to log in. It doesn't really matter that a human didn't write it. This was a case where it does matter. And when we see these kind of cost-cutting measures by supposedly reputable news sources, that's going to cost you time and money if you're not careful and you're not thinking about the fact that this is not an article written by a human with experience in your industry. And we've been saying since we started this podcast that AI is not going to take your job. We've said things like, somebody using AI might take your job, but AI itself will not take your job in most cases. However, here's a case where AI could make you lose your job or at least cause you grief with your constituents, your management, or just in general trying to clean up a mess. So, Lou, what do you think here?
I think it's okay to use AI to refine your ideas
Yeah.
and to present viewpoints that maybe, to evolve. The best creative experiences I ever had were in Congress with, working with friends, like working with you or working with other folks that I've done, and we bounce ideas off each other and it works really well. The problem I have with what we just saw is these articles should have started with, if you to ask an AI and then give a very brief, this is what it would tell you. Now, having told you that, let me give you the little inside bits. Because quite frankly, I can ask the darn AI myself. So why am I reading your summary? I don't know what question you asked. I don't know if it was useful. You didn't tell me that.
Well, I think that's the problem here in that this is this is clickbait. This is to get you to click on the article and to read it, and to do that with minimal effort. And that's where the problem comes in. When you're talking about, again, supposedly reputable news sources that are, and again, we're making a supposition here that that's what happened. If it's not what happened, then we have two really bad reporters writing out articles that are just very high level.
I'd love
And
to know it if this
yeah,
is not what happened. If it is what happened, I'd love to give them some tips on how to not waste my time.
correct. And really, what this was is exactly what you would get if you went to your favorite LLM and said, "Give me the things to consider as I'm looking to purchase video conferencing solutions for my enterprise." And it would spit out an article almost exactly like this. And the same with, I'm looking to roll out AI across my enterprise. Give me what I need to know and what I need to be looking for. And you know what? Starting there is not a bad place to start, to get some things maybe you weren't thinking about. But then you need to dig deeper on your own. You need to do that.
You also
But
have to assume that we're going to do the same thing,
right.
especially if you're
But
talking to IT professionals. Do you think there's an IT professional out there that isn't already doing this?
exactly.
Really?
And but there may be somebody who's new to the job, or maybe they're lazy, or maybe they just aren't even thinking. And we all have our moments where we slip up. Maybe we look at this article and say, "Oh, okay, I got a meeting with the Zoom representative next week. I'm going to ask him, well, how do you manage my data security?" Which, yeah, you should ask him that, but you're just going to ask what this high level AI told you to ask about, as opposed to something a little deeper, more interesting, and more pertinent to you. And that can
Which
lead you to
would
make a
be,
very expensive mistake.
so here would be a great example of that. I have my bulk of my operations are in the United States, but I also have an office in Germany. How do you handle data segmentation for via GDPR, right? Which is definitely a concern.
Right.
Wasn't in there.
Exactly.
So I just got to say, do a little more work. If you're going to give us these articles, tell us what you asked. What is the question you asked, right? And if it's a basic question and you're somebody who, I got my start in the IT space from two things: Linux and computer world. If you know the lingo if you know all the acronyms in the space, I love computer world. I love info world. These are resources I love. Please do better. You can do better.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? Speaking of doing better,
Now it's time for the CVE of the week.
it's like Groundhog Day, folks. I am here talking about, once again, WordPress. And the problem is, we love WordPress. We love it. We built sites on it. What I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to talk about two vulnerabilities, and I'm going to give you a small piece of advice. So let's get going on this one. There are two. One is being actively exploited right now, CVE 2024 1197.2 in the Hunk Companion plugin for WordPress. To install other vulnerable plugins that could be open the door to a variety of attacks. So this particular attack allows you to silently install other extensions, right? This is very much like the last one we talked about, different module, same mechanism. Hunk is a cool tool. It allows you to take these themes and expand them and do really neat things with them. And it's very popular. There are 10,000 instances of this plugin being exposed to the network just on a casual scan that the folks who gave us this came up with it. And this came out of Hacker News. It's fixed as of 1.85. It's a 9.8 in the odamometer because of the next one, right? There's another high severity flaw in WP Forms plugin, CVE 2024-11-205. It makes it possible for authenticated attackers and subscriber level access and above.
It can refund your Stripe payments and cancel subscriptions. So this is
Right.
definitely
So
a
it's the
monetary impact.
ultimate financial denial of service attack on your WordPress based service. This is going to hit you in the pocketbook. So you can read about this in the show notes, but I'm going to give you this piece of advice. When you install an application like WordPress, you're not installing an application, you're installing an ecosystem. This is true of, Apache web browser. This is true. Think of it like you would think of an operating system. A lot of folks deploy this stuff in fire and forget mode. And you need to be as on the ball on patching this thing as you would be for your core operating system, whichever the core operating system of your choice is.
Yeah, and then one last thing I would say on this is, and we talked about this when we talked about the last WordPress vulnerability a week or two ago. A lot of times, WordPress is deployed as almost a skunk work project when a department feels that IT is not giving them what they need. So they deploy their own server running WordPress or their own cloud instance of WordPress. And the takeaway I want to give to you is seek those out and offer to help and to take over the management of the system, because skunkworks and shadow IT, which is what that is, are prime targets for attack. And when you're a sales enablement professional, or you're a marketing person, or you're an HR lead, you might not be thinking security. You might not be thinking about making sure you got the latest patches. You're just worried about getting your function running.
You want to get your
I,
content out there. That's what
whatever
WordPress is great for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But if that becomes a vector of attack into your organization, whether it's directly into your organization or whether it's just data about your organization, then that's IT's responsibility to deal with it, and it's the CISO's responsibility to deal with it. So open up some funds. Go get additional budget in order to support this, because otherwise it's going to cost you a lot more in the long run.
Not only that, co-opt the users that are willing to take the amount of effort to set this sort of thing up, because these are valuable people. These are the people who will be your go-tos and your signposts in those organizations. So you should always be seeking to say yes, but you should always be figuring out how to fund that yes. So my favorite thing is to say yes, and it will cost you this much. But a lot of times you have to think about the cross-organizational reputational power you can get from helping folks. That can be an amazing force multiplier. But please do not ignore this stuff. Don't try to straight up shut it down, because they're going to go around you.
Yeah, a no is the worst thing you can say. It
Co-opt
should
them.
be yes and. So yes, we can do that, and it's going to cost this much, and we need these resources, and we'll work with you in this way. No is
Absolutely.
just asking for shadow IT to come in and
And
put you at risk.
absolutely.
So that's going to cover this week's episode. We couldn't do this podcast without listeners like you. We would love to hear what you think. Do you have thoughts on those AI written articles? Do you have thoughts on English being the new Python or the new C++? Anything else that we've discussed? Do you want to hear about something else that we haven't discussed? Send us email at feedback@itsparkcast.com. That's feedback at itsparkcast.com, or hit us up on X at IT SPARC Cast. Be sure to like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell if you're on YouTube so that you find out when we release new videos and new podcasts. And tell your friends about us. Tell your colleagues about us. If you feel you're getting value out of us, if you're spending your time listening to us, tell your friends and colleagues so that they can get the same information that you're getting. That's really going to help this channel grow. We appreciate that. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.